So, what if we've been wrong about Eddard Stark all this time? Like, really wrong. We all saw him as this man of honor, the guy who kept his word, followed the old ways, respected life, served justice. But what if all that honor wasn't just for Robert Baratheon? What if, deep down, Ned Stark had made a secret vow, not to Robert, but to Aerys, the Mad King? Now, I know what you're thinking. Why the hell would Ned of all people work for that lunatic? But let me walk you through it. Back in the day, before Robert's rebellion, House Stark was still kind of quiet in the South. Ned was in the Vale with Jon Arryn doing his squire thing. And the Mad King? Yeah, he was already going mad. Burning. People alive, hearing voices, paranoid as hell. But here's the twist. Aerys wasn't stupid. Insane, yeah, but not dumb. He knew rebellion was coming. He could smell it. He saw Tywin backing off, Rhaegar getting too popular, and the lords, whispering behind banners. He needed someone quiet, trustworthy, far from the capital's politics, someone young enough to mold but honorable enough to keep a vow. That's when Varys, his whisperer, dropped a name. Eddard Stark. Quiet, loyal, obedient. So, maybe, just maybe, Aerys arranged for a secret meeting. No court, no lords, just Varys, Ned, and a cell in King's Landing, underground where secrets die. And there, the Mad King made an offer. Serve me in silence, and I'll spare your house when the fire comes. And the way Aerys said it, maybe it wasn't even about politics. Maybe he knew that someday House Targaryen would fall. He saw his doom. He saw it in flames, or in Bran's visions, or whispered by some shadow sorcerer from Asshai. So he made one last desperate move. He planted a Stark in the enemy camp, and Ned, he didn't say yes for power. He said yes because Aerys threatened Winterfell, threatened Rickard and Benjen and all of them. Maybe he even showed Ned wildfire beneath the crypts of Winterfell. You never know with Aerys. He was obsessed with fire and burning old oaths. So, Ned agreed. But here's the sick twist. That oath? It stayed with him after the war. Think about it. Why didn't Ned ever talk about the war? Why was he so cold when it came to the past? Why did he never tell Robert about Rhaegar and Lyanna's secret? Oh yeah, everyone says it was about Jon. To protect the boy. Sure, that too. But what if it wasn't just for Jon's sake? What if Ned kept that secret because it was part of the deal? Because he had taken an oath? Not to Robert, but to the Targaryens? That changes everything. Because now, Ned isn't just the man who died for honor. He's the man who lived a lie for a cause we never saw. And maybe that's why he hesitated so much in King's Landing. Why he didn't push Robert harder. Why he tried to send Cersei away instead of fighting. Because he knew, deep down, he wasn't truly Robert's man. He was never Robert's man. And now imagine this. What if Varys always knew? What if Varys kept tabs on Ned for years after the war? Maybe that's why Varys tried to protect him during his downfall. Not just out of pity, but because he still saw Ned as Aerys's final pawn, the one card he could still play. Maybe the whole reason Varys told Ned to bend the knee and confess was because that was the plan. Aerys may have been dead, but his vision, a Targaryen restoration, wasn't. Ned just never stopped serving. He was like a dying knight holding on to a broken vow. And that's where it gets real spooky. Because you start to realize, if Ned was secretly loyal to the Targaryens, then his silence about Jon's true parentage wasn't just fatherly love or fear of Robert. It was duty. The same kind of duty that made him die with his mouth shut. Remember what he said to Varys in the dungeons. My daughter, I want her safe. He didn't ask to save himself, because maybe in that moment he knew he was done. He'd served the Mad King. He'd kept the vow. And now, his last hope was to protect the final Targaryen, Jon Snow, by keeping the lie alive. So when people say Ned died for honor, I'm like, nah, man, he died for the Mad King's ghost. So here's the thing people never talk about when they bring up the Tower of Joy. Why the hell were the best of the King's Guard guarding a pregnant woman? Think about it. Rhaegar was dead. The war was basically over. King's Landing had fallen, the Mad King was burnt to ash, and Robert Baratheon sat his sweaty ass on the Iron Throne. And yet, Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, and Sir Gerald Hightower were out in the desert guarding Lyanna Stark? Why? What were they protecting? And here's where it all ties back to Ned's secret loyalty. See, if Ned was working, even silently, for Aerys or the Targaryen line, then the Tower of Joy wasn't some tragic love story side quest. It was a mission he knew about long before it happened. I mean, think about the look on his face when he found Lyanna. That wasn't just a brother mourning his sister. That was a man who already knew she was there. What if Ned didn't just stumble onto Lyanna's location from whispers and clues? What if Varys told him? What if the entire Kingsguard wasn't just guarding Lyanna, but waiting for Ned? Because maybe Rhaegar made a deal before dying. Maybe he told his best men, "If I fall and my father burns, don't go to the throne. Go to the girl, guard the child, and trust only one man, Eddard Stark." Why Ned? Because Rhaegar knew. He knew. Ned had bent in silence. He knew Ned had taken the Mad King's oath. He knew Ned was the only lord in the rebellion with the spine to keep a lie alive for life. So when Ned rode up with 6 men who died in a battle no one ever saw, that wasn't just a fight. That was a passing of the torch. Arthur Dayne didn't die because he hated Ned. He died because honor demanded it. He couldn't abandon his oath, but he also couldn't kill the man who had been chosen to protect the child. And maybe, just maybe, Ned didn't kill Arthur at all. Let that sink in. The only account we have of what happened at the Tower of Joy is from Ned himself. And Ned Stark? Yeah, he lied. We know he lied about Jon. So what if that wasn't the only lie? What if Arthur Dayne let Ned win? What if the last act of House Targaryen's loyal guard was to hand over the blood of the dragon and vanish into history? Because let's be honest, if Ned truly thought Jon was Rhaegar's son, the heir to a throne Robert would have killed him for, then why not just dump the baby somewhere safer? Why raise him in Winterfell? Because the Mad King's whisper still echoed in his head. Serve me in silence. He wasn't just protecting Jon. He was protecting a legacy, one that didn't belong to the North, one that burned with dragon blood. And here's another chilling detail. Have you ever noticed how Jon never quite fit in with the rest of the Stark kids? It wasn't just because he was a bastard. No, it was something deeper, like Ned couldn't love him the same way. Not because he didn't care, but because he was afraid of breaking, afraid that if he loved Jon too openly, the secret would spill out. And maybe, just maybe, Ned kept Jon close because he was waiting. Waiting for the right moment. Waiting for Viserys or Dany to make their move. Waiting for Varys to send a raven. Waiting for the dream of Aerys to rise again. But the moment never came. Robert drank, Cersei schemed, the realm moved on. And Ned? He just grew old and tired, haunted by a past that never left him. So when Robert asked him to come south and be Hand of the King, part of him must have thought, this is it. This is the moment I've been preparing for. Maybe he believed he could finally start tilting the wheel back toward the Targaryens, or at least protect Jon's future from the shadows. But when he got to King's Landing, the game was already rigged. Littlefinger, Cersei, Lannisters everywhere. And Varys, the one man who might have been on his side, just watched from the corners waiting to see if Ned would remember his old vow. And you know what's wild? Maybe Varys was disappointed because Ned didn't move fast enough. He still clung to the north, still thought he could play it clean. But the truth is, Ned was too slow for the game. The man who'd kept a lie burning for 17 years choked when it came time to use it. So now we're left with this haunting idea. The Tower of Joy wasn't just a secret birth scene. It was a ritual, a handing off of Targaryen blood, a secret alliance buried in sand and sorrow, guarded by knights who chose death over betrayal, and a brother who chose silence over truth. All right, so picture this. Ned rides into King's Landing. Stoic, cold, quiet, just like always. But this time, he's not walking into a court. He's walking into a trap. A place thick with lies, where every smile hides a dagger. Now, if Ned had really been just a loyal servant of Robert, you'd expect him to move quicker, right? Find the rot, cut it out, clean house. But he doesn't. He hesitates. And when he finds out Cersei's kids aren't Robert's, he still doesn't act. He goes to her. He warns her. Now seriously, think about that. Your best friend's wife is committing high treason, lying about the king's heirs, and instead of exposing her immediately, Ned tries to give her a chance to run. Why? Because that moment wasn't just about mercy. It was about stalling. Maybe somewhere in the back of his mind, Ned remembered the Mad King's whispers. Fire must be preserved. Maybe he saw Cersei's children as a threat, not just to Robert, but to the balance. Maybe he believed removing her suddenly would ignite a war too soon. A war Jon wasn't ready for. A war the Targaryen line wasn't ready for. So he played it safe. Too safe. He thought he could control the storm, but he forgot. He was in a city built on wildfire. And then there's Varys, always lurking in the shadows. He tells Ned, "You're a fool if you think honor will save you." But what if Varys meant something deeper? Like, "You're failing the mission we gave you." See, Varys had always wanted a return to order, to peace, and deep down, he still believed in Targaryens. Just the right ones. That's why he backed Viserys. That's why he later supported Daenerys. And maybe at that time, he hoped Ned, the last quiet keeper of the secret, would use his position to prepare the realm for that future. But Ned, he didn't move fast enough. He didn't whisper the right truths. He didn't light the signal. He still tried to play it clean. He thought exposing Cersei would fix everything. But all it did was give the lions their excuse. They moved faster, sliced harder. And Ned, he was already bleeding honor when they came for him. And that brings us to Littlefinger. Let's not ignore him, because he's the true wild card in all this. Littlefinger didn't just betray Ned because he loved chaos. He did it because he knew Ned was hiding something. Maybe not everything, but enough to sense that Ned was playing a different game. One that didn't involve gold or titles, but bloodlines and ghosts. Think about how Pedder looked at him during those last days, like he was trying to read a book written in fire. And then there's Renly. Good old smiling, ambitious Renly. He tells Ned, "Strike now, take the throne. We'll put you in power." And Ned refuses. Why? Because deep down, he doesn't believe it's his to take. He never did. Because Ned Stark, even in Robert's court, was still carrying Aerys's shadow on his back, still hearing the whisper, "Protect the heir, hold the lie." So, instead of taking the throne, he offers it to Stannis. Even though he knows Stannis is cold and hated and possibly unfit to rule. Because in Ned's mind, maybe it's not about who rules next, but who survives until the Targaryens return. That's why he writes the letter. To Stannis. Not Robert, not Renly. He's trying to keep the kingdom from imploding before the dragons return. But the joke is, He's already too late. Cersei finds out. The Lannisters move, and Ned is thrown in the black cells. Now here's where it gets real poetic. Ned sits alone in the dark, thinking he's failed, thinking the lie will die with him. But then Varys shows, up again. Varys, who says, "You want your daughter to live? Say the words. Confess." And in that moment, maybe Ned realizes, this is the final test. He bends the knee. He confesses to a crime he didn't commit. He betrays his honor publicly, not for himself, but for the lie, because that's what Aerys demanded long ago, right? Serve me in silence. And Ned? He kept the silence all the way to the block. Now think about how that changes the whole scene when Arya watches her father die. We always saw it as the death of honor. But what if it was the last act of Targaryen loyalty? What if Ned didn't just die for truth, but for a truth he could never tell? And Jon Snow, the boy growing up in the north, was the secret he took with him to the grave. So here's what never sat right with me. Why would a man like Ned Stark, someone obsessed with honor, someone who told the truth even when it burned, bring home a bastard son from war, claim him as his own, and then refuse to say a single word about the mother? Not even to Catelyn, who suffered for it every day? Something doesn't add up, and maybe that's because Jon Snow wasn't his son. We know that now, of course, R+LJ and all that. But rewind time. Go back to when Jon was just a boy in Winterfell, always standing on the edge of things, half in, half out. Never really a Stark, never really a Snow, just a shadow in the halls of the North. Why? Because that's how Ned needed him to be. Think about it. If Jon had grown up proud and strong, if he'd acted like a prince, people would have noticed. If he looked too much like Rhaegar, questions would have been asked. So, instead, Ned made sure Jon stayed humble, quiet, tucked away at the edge of family gatherings, invisible. He even encouraged him to take the black. And now that decision, it hits different. It's not just Ned being cold, it's strategy. Ned knew the Knights. Watch was the perfect hiding place for a Targaryen, a life of service. No wives, no sons, no heirs, no ambition, no threat to the Iron Throne. And remember that little scene when Jon tells Benjen he wants to join the Watch? How Ned just says, "You don't know what you're giving up." He wasn't just talking about girls and feasts. He was talking about bloodlines, about the crown. Because Ned had raised Jon as a Snow to protect him, but he also knew, someday, Jon might need to remember who he really was. And maybe that's why Ned never told anyone the truth. Not even Jon. Because the second Jon knew, the whole game would change. He'd stop being a ghost, and ghosts don't scare kings. But dragons do. Now, let's talk about Jon at the Wall. From the moment he arrives, he's different, smarter, stronger, more focused, but there's something else. He leads. Even when he tries not to. Even when he's being bullied, or mocked, or blamed. People follow him. It's like there's something in him that commands loyalty. Like the blood in his veins remembers being royal. And that makes you wonder, did Ned know this would happen? Did he send Jon to the Watch not to hide him, but to prepare him? Because that's what the Night's Watch does. It burns the softness out of you. It teaches you death and duty and sacrifice. Everything a king needs to know before he puts on a crown, and maybe Ned, with all his silence, hoped the Watch would make Jon ready. Ready for the day when the world would need a Targaryen again. But here's the heartbreaking part. Jon didn't know any of this. He thought he was just a Snow, just a castaway. So, when he killed Qhorin Halfhand, or when he fought the wildlings, or when he stood at Castle Black against the dead, he wasn't doing it for legacy. He was doing it because it was right. Just like Ned would have wanted. because that's the final twist in all of this. Ned didn't just hide Jon's blood. He raised him in the only way that would make the world accept him if the truth ever came out. Not as a dragon with fire and fury, but as a Stark, with ice in his veins and honor in his bones. And maybe that's why the North eventually followed. Jon. Why they crowned him. Why even wildlings stood behind him. Because he wasn't just a name, he was Ned's ghost, walking, the last proof that silence could raise a better king than any throne ever could. And look at the irony. Ned died with his head on a block, called a traitor. Jon died for the Watch, stabbed by his own brothers. Both men killed for doing the right thing. Both men resurrected, one in legend, one in flesh, by a truth the world wasn't ready for. So, maybe, just maybe, Ned's vow to Aerys didn't die with him. Maybe it rose again. In Jon. In a bastard who wasn't a bastard. In a ghost who became a king. You know what's wild? People always talk about Daenerys like she was this miracle. A girl who survived. Fire. A child of storm. A queen who came from nothing. But the truth is, she was never forgotten. Not by Varys, not by Illyrio, and definitely not by Ned Stark. You see, when the war ended and Aerys was dead, Robert wanted to wipe out every last Targaryen. No mercy. No survivors. He would have hunted baby Daenerys through Essos with fire and steel if he could. But he didn't. Why? Because Varys lied. He told Robert that she was nothing. A harmless girl, a nobody, and Ned? He backed that up with silence. He never pushed, never demanded she be hunted, never so much as uttered her name. Why? Because he knew. He knew she was part of the deal. That oath he took in the dungeons beneath the Red Keep, the one no one ever saw, wasn't just about Jon. It was about the whole bloodline. Rhaegar's child, Aerys's daughter, and maybe, even, a future queen. And the more you look at it, the more it makes sense. Illyrio didn't just find Daenerys. He protected her, groomed her, introduced her to Drogo, not because it was random, but because it was part of a plan, a slow burn restoration, one that waited for the realm to rot before lighting the fuse. And who was helping that plan from the shadows? Varys. The same man who spoke with Ned in whispers, the same man who said, "I serve the realm." But the realm, in his eyes, always meant a peaceful Targaryen throne. Not Robert, not Joffrey, not chaos, but order, restored by blood and fire, and that's where things get terrifying. Because while Robert drank, and the Lannisters schemed, and Ned kept quiet, Daenerys was growing, learning, watching, and eventually burning. But here's the twist. Ned never saw what she would become. He died thinking she might be a hope, a child of legacy, a girl who could carry the crown Jon would never wear. He never imagined she'd become the Dragon Queen, the one who would burn cities, crush armies, rule by fear. But then again, maybe he should have seen it. After all, she was Aerys's daughter, and maybe that's the curse of Ned Stark's silence. He protected Jon. He let Daenerys live. He honored a vow to a mad king. But he never saw what that vow might cost the world. Because when Daenerys walked into fire and came out with dragons, everything changed. She wasn't just a survivor anymore. She was a storm reborn. And in that moment, every move Varys had made, every whisper, every delay, paid off. The plan was in motion. The Targaryens were coming home. But here's the real tragedy. Jon and Daenerys? They were on a collision course from the beginning. Two secrets carried through war and lies, two heirs of fire and ice, and Ned Stark, the man who protected both in silence, would never see what happened when they finally met. And when they did, Love wasn't enough, because truth, once revealed, is more dangerous than any sword. Let me leave you with this. If Daenerys had known why she was spared, if Jon had known sooner who he really was, if Ned had written one more letter, told one more truth, whispered one last name, could things have ended differently? Could the realm have avoided fire raining down on King's Landing? Or was this always the cost of keeping the Mad King's secret? A war, a queen unchained, a throne covered in ashes. The city was still burning. When Jon walked through it, ash in the air, blood on the stones, screams echoing like ghosts. He looked up at the Red Keep, the place where his father lost his head. And now it was cracked in half, smoke pouring out like dragon breath. And there she was, Daenerys Targaryen, standing on the steps, alone, her face lit by fire, her voice cold as winter. She'd won. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like judgment, and for Jon, that moment was everything. All the questions, all the doubts, all the lies, all the silence Ned Stark had kept his whole life. It was all roaring in his ears now. He remembered her words. They don't get to choose. He remembered Tyrion saying, "Everywhere she goes, evil men die, and we cheer her for it. But what happens when you're the only one left?" And he remembered Ned, the man who never said much, who died without a shout, who carried a secret in his blood and never let it go. And now Jon saw it. Ned hadn't saved Daenerys for the world. He'd saved her for fire. But maybe he never meant for her to use it like this. The Dragon Queen, who was supposed to save the realm, had become the very thing her father was feared for. The madness didn't skip a generation. It evolved. She didn't just burn enemies. She burned innocence. She didn't conquer a city. She cleansed it. And Jon? Jon had Ned Stark's blood in his heart, but he also had Rhaegar's fire in his veins. Two legacies, two paths, one choice. He stood before Daenerys in the ruined throne room. Snow falling, the Iron Throne twisted and blackened behind her. She spoke of a new world, a free world, a better one. But her eyes looked like heiresses. Jon kissed her, held her close, and then killed her. A quiet thrust. A whisper of mercy. Just like Ned would have done. Because here's the truth that hit Jon harder than any blade ever could. Ned Stark had protected a Targaryen his whole life, but he'd never known what kind of Targaryen she would become. He'd sworn a vow to the Mad King. But Jon ended up being the one who broke it. And in that moment, it wasn't just Daenerys who died, it was the last breath of that secret. The silence Ned had carried from the dungeons of King's Landing to the snows of Winterfell. It ended, with fire and blood on Jon's hands. And maybe that was the only way it could have ended. Because you don't serve madness. You end it. So when Drogon melted the throne and carried Daenerys away, Jon just stood there, alone. No crown. No victory. Just a name no one would speak again, and in a way, that was Ned's true legacy. Not the lies, not the honor, not the silence, but Jon. The boy he raised, the truth he protected, the blade he never wielded. Because in the end, it wasn't honor that saved the realm. It was the ghost of a man who'd never tell you why. And that's how the story ends. Not with a king on a throne, not with a dragon in the sky, but with one man's silence echoing through time. Ned Stark never lifted a sword for the Mad King, but he did something far more dangerous. He kept his secret alive, and it took the whole world burning, just to bury it again.